Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Talking Davos, Day 2 evening sessions, live from the studios in Davos. Today, this evening, we have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Babatunde Osotimehin, who is the Executive Director of the UN Population Fund. Welcome, Dr. Babatunde.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you here.
Thanks for asking me.
So you started your career as a doctor.
Yes.
And can you tell your story from being a doctor today to lead one of the biggest agencies in the UN?
Well, interesting story. I went to med school in Nigeria. I qualified, actually I was calculating it today. I qualified in 1972, so 44 years ago as a physician. I did my initial practice in Nigeria. Then I went to the UK and did a few things in the UK as a specialist. And I specialized in internal medicine, endocrinology, so diabetes, thyroid disease and all. Then I went back to Nigeria. Then I went to the United States again, did some more. In those days, you know, the more you did, the better you felt because you wanted to be the best doctor. Then I went back after the States and I started teaching at the University of Ibadan, my medical school. And, you know, Providence took me through that and I became the head of the school, became the provost of the College of Medicine. And then after that, whilst I was doing that, I started looking at things that I was interested in, you know. One of the biggest issues we had at the time were numbers of women who wanted children and were not having children. And some of the things we felt was because of their endocrine status. And so I was interested and we were doing research. But I thought the harvest was too little. And many of them didn't have anything to do with their endocrine status. Many of them had problems with their reproductive system. So they had infection in the past, they had blockage of their tubes, and so they couldn't have children. So the question was, why are we waiting for them to come to us when they get to that end stage? What can we do in the community to stop that from happening? So I started working in the community, understanding what are the effective agents in the community. And it was very productive. I did this with bacteriologists, sociologists, economists. So we had some really fantastic results out of that. It was whilst I was doing that the HIV problem in Nigeria was growing. And so I got called by the Nigerian government to lead the response to HIV in Nigeria. So I spent 10 years of my life doing that. And in my career, that's the spike that I enjoy most because it took me to every part of Nigeria, 774 local governments, all the states. So I knew the governors' first name basis. I was able to do everything I wanted to do. We raised the profile of HIV from 10% acceptance to 95%. We started a treatment program. When I left, we were treating 350,000 Nigerians who had AIDS. So it was quite positive for me. And we were able to access resources, both internally and externally, for $1 billion for HIV in Nigeria. So that was very good. When it was in that the then president of Nigeria asked me to be Minister of Health. And so I did that. And I enjoyed that as well, but it was a short period of time. I finished that. And then, you know, I applied for this job and I got it. So it was just kind of a journey that I went through.
You make it sound so easy. And you've been a practitioner, you've been an administrator, doing those healthcare interventions, HIV and things like that. You've been a policymaker, a lawmaker, and now you're at UN shaping agendas across the world. Like, what are some of your key shifts that you saw in your career as you evolved over the years?
I think it's about looking at, you know, being careful about your decisions because you knew it was going to affect thousands of people. So you always think about how do you come to this decision? Is this the best that you have to offer at this time? And how do you make sure that people understand what you're trying to do? Simplicity, very simple. You have to be very simple in terms of the message you give. So people can understand where you're coming from. And you always look at how you're going to affect the largest number of people. So you're not just looking at small sections, you're looking at a bigger picture all the time. I think it really makes you, develops you, and enables you to make sure that you are being effective and you are using resources efficiently to be able to make change happen in the world. I think it's a very important piece for me.
Dr. Babatunde, your eyes literally lit up when you spoke about your work across Nigeria and leveraging communities and really just that power of communities. Right now in your work in an executive position with the United Nations Population Fund, can you speak to how you are able to work with communities from across the world and how they can affect the change?
It's the same.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that I learned, as a doctor, the way you are comported, the way they expect you to, you come out and you expect everybody to just respect you because you're a doctor.
Yeah.
But a touch of humility tells you that outside of that hospital, you're just another person on the road. And one of the things I learned was, if I went to northern Nigeria, I'm not from the north. I went to eastern Nigeria, I'm not from the east. Your ability to sit with a community leader on the floor and share a drink and eat what they eat and talk to them. And your message to them is that you are bringing something of value to them. You are not saying what they are doing is wrong, but you are saying, in addition to what you are doing, I can add value to you. Once they accept you, you can do anything. But you have to build that trust and that confidence. It's such an important piece. Most of us don't do it, and that's why I always quarrel with international NGOs who come and they do the helicopter thing. They think all they have to do is just talk to them because these Africans don't know what they're talking about. But actually, every culture in the world has always healed itself. Every culture in the world has always communicated with itself. Every culture in the world has always looked after food security. So don't come and make it appear as if people don't have. They have. And they've had thousands and thousands of years to perfect it. They communicate, they heal themselves, they educate themselves. So what you are bringing is just additional. And it's not a replacement to what they have. And what you find is that some of the things they already have actually are very successful. And so you're just making sure that what you are bringing adds to that success. And that's what you want to celebrate.
That's quite powerful, what you said. Like, there are so many things I'm kind of moved. There's one thing that you spoke about in terms of scale, one in terms of trust, and one in terms of listening. And in terms of trust and listening, scaling these two things itself could solve a lot of these.
Totally. Let me give you an example of what I had with the previous Sultan of Sokoto. Sokoto is a seat of the Muslim religion in Nigeria. The Sultan is the head of the Muslim community in Nigeria. I saw him in Abuja. I said, Your Excellency, I want you to make a recording in the 3 languages, Hausa, Fulfulde, and English, on HIV. And he said, I'll do it. That, of course, that meant that we had to drive from Abuja to Sokoto, like 6, 7, 10 hours of driving. It was good. We got there, and then we got to his gate, and his courtiers let us go in. They said, no, we're not going to have this. So I was standing there, totally perplexed. I didn't know what to do, because I couldn't call him. For some reason, he came out and saw So he called and said, what's going on? I said, sir, we're here. I said, come. So we got in. And when we got in, they said we should sit down. And then after some time, he came out in full regalia. He actually went and wore one of his best. He took us to his best sitting room, and we sat. And then he called his people. He said, these people that are here to help us. And he made the most profound statement I've ever heard. He said, if I don't talk about this, I'll have no people to govern because they'll die. So he said, we have to. So he started, he took the script, he kind of, did a bit of editing because he didn't want to talk about things I wanted him to talk about, but it was fine. And he did in those 3 languages. You won't believe, when I got the tape, I ran to his studio first, and I just made sure he went to Nigeria. So everybody heard it. So you couldn't even stop. And the moment he spoke, the Muslim ulama in Nigeria changed. Everybody listened to us. So we had people talking about it. It was powerful.
I love that example, and you're speaking to the power of words and people and what inspires you and how the thing that inspires you could inspire so many others. Could you perhaps speak to some of your key inspirations in your last days at Davos?
Yeah, my sense is that here at Davos, we have, interest groups. Somebody comes, defending an interest group and all. I had an encounter today which was very interesting. And Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was there. And we were talking about health. And, I'm a doctor, so I listen. And I practice everywhere, so I understand what they're saying. And the conversation was about Northern Europe and America. So we sat. Ngozi was the first to say, I don't understand what you guys are saying. I want my African brother to talk about this. So I stood up, I said, the very basis of what you're talking about doesn't exist in the rest of the world. And by your conversation, you're excluding 3/4 of the world. The Indian subcontinent, very large parts of China, Asia, all of Africa. You're excluding them. Because you're talking of things that don't matter to them. They are struggling with very basic things. You are talking about how you want to introduce new drugs and make them effective for cancer. It's good. You want it. But what Africa needs is promotive health. How do I tell my young kids out in the street not to smoke so they don't get cancer? How do I encourage them to do physical exercise so they don't get obese? How do I stop them drinking all of this poison that they drink? How do I ensure that all the junk food you bring as KFC does not make them obese? That's what I want. How do I reduce their salt intake? Because when you do that, you actually the burden of disease goes, and you have healthy lifestyle, and these people can grow a healthy life, and then they can grow old. That's what you want. So we must provide a large pot of money that talks to health promotion, so people understand it. So we should not. It's selfish, but as a doctor, I can be selfish. I can stay, wear my white coat, and stay at the end of the corridor, and I'll ask you to come when you're ill, because I will make money from you. But that's not, when you look at public health is about making people healthy. It is not hospital health. And that is a major shift we have to talk about.
This year, last year we saw several things. The UN SDGs getting announced. We had this COP21 summit. And now World Economic Forum is talking about the 4th industrial revolution. Now, what do you see as the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is people. Nobody's talking about the people who will drive this industrial revolution.
Sure.
And I hear today, when I read it, it talked about, the aging population, how it addresses 2 billion young people who are there, restless, energetic, wanting to do something, wanting to be disruptive, wanting to make sure that they can contribute. And when you talk to the millennials, they want to contribute. They're not just interested in what their parents did, or just establish a middle class life, and all of that. No, they want to be recognized for contributing. We're not giving them the space. And we can, because it's so possible. Can you imagine how much money is locked up in the mortgage system, in insurance systems, in the central banks of the world, that is not being used at all? Do you know what it means to be able to give a young person who has an idea $100,000? You can transform the whole thing. And today, people talk about lack of jobs. They talk about the migration from Africa into Europe. All that is happening because we are not addressing the root causes. The root causes are, the thing to do is educate them. And I'm not talking numeracy and literacy. I'm talking entrepreneurship. I'm talking vocational training. I'm talking comprehensive sexuality education. So girls go to school, stay in school, and they mature and to their full potential. They are not married off at 11. They are not vandalized. They are not violated. Their rights are protected. And you have them going into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's what we should be doing. And then provide them access to credit with appropriate risk management so that they can start startups. Some of them will fail, but a large number of them will succeed. And then they'll be creating jobs. And that's where we have to go. No government or a private sector can employ everybody that is educated. Potentially in the world today, given the internet, everybody will be educated. You don't have to go to school. You can download things, you can read it, you can understand it, you can create your own kind of understanding and knowledge. But if you have that, then you must be able to apply it. You must be able to access the resources to enable you take that imagination to a new level that will either give you a product, or enable you to bring others to come and join you. That is where we have to go. And for me, it's that leapfrogging that we have to do in Africa and in Asia to be able to join this industrial revolution. It won't happen if you don't develop young people.
We would have loved to continue this conversation, but in the interest of time, and since our next guest is waiting, it was a great pleasure having you, Doctor, here in this show. Listen to people, build trust, engage communities, think of scale, and engage millennials. That's what the message Dr. Babatunde Osotimehin is giving from the studios in Davos. Stay tuned for our next guest, #ShapingDavos.
Thank you, Doctor.